Trinity Tran, I am the co-founder and lead organizer of the California Public Banking Alliance and Public Bank Los Angeles.
Wow. Okay.
Also executive director of Urban Partners Los Angeles Food Bank. The evolution of public banking really began in 2017 as activists were working on the ground pushing their municipal local governments to divest from big banks. And this was done in solidarity with indigenous groups who were at the end of 2016, 2017 fighting in Standing Rock against oil pipelines that were encroaching on indigenous lands, that were destroying the earth, poisoning the water. We were watching horrified as indigenous communities were getting shot at with water cannons, were being brutalized by private police force who had been hired by the oil companies. So in solidarity with what we were witnessing, activists in cities like Seattle and Los Angeles expanded the front lines and took the fight to our local governments and said, by virtue of these banks who are financing these oil pipelines, banking with our city, we were in essence funding the destruction of communities and the planet. That then inspired us in LA, because Wells Fargo was also the primary banker, our primary bank in Los Angeles, a bank that has a long laundry list of crimes against humanity, from redlining communities, illegal foreclosures of working class family, discriminatory practices against communities of color. We wanted Los Angeles to divest from Wells Fargo, so we launched Divest LA, and for 9 months led a grassroots campaign to restructure the Los Angeles financial system so that our funds could be diverted towards socially and environmentally responsible avenues. So it started as a very visceral fight against big predatory banks, but what evolved was a very practical and powerful solution to address the common harms of the private financial system, and that would be to create a public bank. We knew with the size of the municipality of Los Angeles, the only banks that would be capable of holding billions of dollars in funds would be large conglomerate Wall Street banks. So divesting funds from Wells Fargo and moving it to another large predatory big bank wasn't a solution. The only true solution was to divest from Wall Street altogether by creating a bank that was owned by the people, accountable, transparent, with socially and environmentally responsible mandates. We are currently in the banking revolution. We are in the midst of a banking revolution. After divestment, we built Public Bank LA to divest from Wall Street altogether and create a bank owned by the people of Los Angeles. We led the Measure B campaign. That was a 4-month campaign that was put on the ballot by the former city council president. We had 4 months without infrastructure, without any real funding, to lead a citywide ballot measure campaign that was the first voter referendum in the nation asking for voter approval to take the next steps to create a local public bank. We were close. We had 4 months, less than a tenth of the budget that it typically takes to win in the city of Los Angeles. We got 430,000 Angelenos to voice their support for a public bank. 430,000 people voting yes to take the next steps on a public bank. Even though we lost that, we knew that we had momentum. Right after our loss on that ballot measure, we pivoted, built a statewide coalition, 10 cities, activists and advocates in 10 cities in California, built the California Public Banking Alliance, introduced a state bill that would streamline the process. And instead of activists in cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco and San Diego creating their own individual public banking policies, we backed one bill that would streamline the process for cities across the state to create public banks. 10 months after we lost Measure B, Governor Newsom signed AB 857, the Public Banking Act, the first public banking bill in the nation. Ellen Brown was very, very critical in that we started formulating the idea of creating an alliance at the end of our Measure B loss, and Ellen had a retreat in Colorado where she brought in activists, public banking activists from across the nation, Ellen Brown's the godmother of public banking.
Right, she's the founder of the Public Banking
Founder of the
Institute,
Public Banking
author
Institute.
of many books.
She flew us out from California. She had activists from across the nation convene at this retreat in Colorado. And at that retreat, we introduced the idea of bringing on an alliance in California, because the movement was so active in California. Coming out of the divestment movements, where activists in Oakland and San Francisco were already pivoting their local governments to focus on finance and how transformative finance was. So the next evolution was to create a public banking movement. So we formed the California Public Banking Alliance at that retreat. We wrote the AB 857 public banking bill. The legislative strategy was to make it a very lightweight bill so that it would be politically, we could feasibly pass that bill in one legislative session. So we didn't want to micromanage details of what a public bank does at the state level. We're leaving those details for cities to formulate on their own, considering how vastly diverse geographic regions in California are, and lending priorities would be different for each region and localities in California. So we created a streamlined bill, and then we built the political capital behind public banking to move it from an idea that was, no one knew what a public bank was years ago. What we had to do was normalize it. The most powerful thing you can do with an idea is to normalize it. So we built the political capital, engaged institutional support to make it a politically safe idea. So we engaged the Democratic Party, Democratic delegates, labor. Bringing labor behind a political concept is very powerful. And then, of course, build the people power behind it, a diverse breadth of a coalition representing everywhere from social justice groups to racial justice groups to environmental justice group to community banks and credit unions. Everyone across the board, we engaged the entire left and built a coalition over 200 groups strong, even had 17 cities and counties pass resolutions to endorse public banking. So all of this moved public banking into the realm of respectable public policy. What the bill does, it creates the legal and regulatory framework for public banks. There's multiple steps that a local municipality has to take in order to form a public bank. The first is to create a viability study, also known as a business plan, that will address the capitalization, the governance, the jurisdiction, the risks of a public bank. That business plan has to be approved by the local governing body, and then it has to be approved by the state regulatory agency, the Department of Financial Protection Innovation Agency, and then it has to be approved by the FDIC. So there's various levels of approval before a public bank license can be granted to a city, but it now creates a framework and a guideline for which cities can apply to form a bank. And after we passed AB 857, cities right now are in the process of creating a public bank following the guidelines of the law we passed. So in Oakland, Alameda County, Oakland, and Berkeley are working to form a regional East Bay public bank. Central Coast cities, including Santa Barbara, Santa Cruz, they are teaming up with 9 counties and cities to create a regional Central Coast public bank. San Francisco just created their task force, their public bank task force, and we'll be working on a business plan. Here in Los Angeles, our motion to create a public bank passed the Economic and Jobs Development Committee in May. We're right now expecting it unanimously. We're expecting it to be scheduled for a vote in the full council. Once that vote is scheduled, then that green lights the next step is for the city to issue an RFP to hire a consultant to write the business plan. Well, we're putting the right political pressure in play right now to have it happen soon. Just 2 nights ago, the Los Angeles County Democratic Party, which is the largest Democratic governing body in all of the nation, represents 3 million Democrats, voted 94-1 to endorse the Los Angeles Public Bank. So we have labor groups like UFCW 770, SEIU 721, Unite Here 11, sending in support letters. We have community groups like Sunrise Movement Los Angeles and neighborhood councils all sending in their support. So we're positioning all of the right elements in place so that the city council can feel comfortable with taking the next steps, knowing that there is community support and political support behind this. Public bank is a financial institution that is owned by a local government, a city, a region, or a state. And the deposit base for a public bank are the taxes, the fees, the fines, the funds, the revenue that our city accrues, which then leverages to create loans just like any other bank. But the difference between a public bank and a private bank is with a public bank, the interest and profit belongs to the community. So rather than it gets siphoned out of state by private Wall Street bankers and private shareholders, that money stays here and gets recirculated back into our local communities so that we can fund things that we need: affordable housing, solutions to homelessness, a Green New Deal for Los Angeles. Right now, if our cities want to build public projects, whether that's bridges, roads, or schools, we have to turn to the private financial market, which charge high interest and high fees. And the private banks, private Wall Street banks, don't have interests that align with the public. They leverage our funds to finance fossil fuel industries that destroy the earth, immigrant detention centers that destroy families, private weapons manufacturers that kill poor folks across the nation. So our money is being leveraged and used in ways that harm our people. And without an option, our money is now being funneled to Wall Street private banks. So with public banking, we're creating a new institution, a publicly owned institution that is completely transparent and accountable to the people. And you look at in the last 20 years, private Wall Street banks have been penalized with nearly 400 legal actions, $200 billion in fines that disproportionately affect low-income communities of color. There is a long history of redlining and reverse redlining and harmful practices against people of the color. During the pandemic, we saw that unfolding when the government was trying to put money into the accounts of people, but poor people don't have bank accounts. In this nation, 1 out of 4 people don't have access to a bank account or adequate access to a banking or a checking account, and they have to turn to predatory payday lenders and check cashers who gouge poor people for the little pay that they have. So we have to create a system with baked-in equity. White people are guaranteed 20% more loans than black families. During the pandemic, 40% of black-owned businesses closed their doors because banks were giving lending priorities to businesses they already had established relationships with. So it is critical that we create a new system that puts power into the hands of the people, that's not based on inequity or extraction, that's truly based on human needs. This was a bottom-up fight. This was a grassroots bottom-up fight, unfunded, going against one of the most powerful industry in the world, and we won. So we had to be very strategic in our focus. We knew we had, from the bill's introduction to Governor Newsom's signature, that was 9 months to move through 3 committees in the Assembly and the Assembly floor, 3 committees in the Senate and the Senate floor, and then back into the Assembly for a concurrence vote. So at every single point of this bill, there were multiple hurdles, 8 to 9 hurdles, from AB 857 to AB 1177, 8 to 9 hurdles where the bill could have killed. And we had, on AB 857, we had 9 financial lobby firms fighting against this bill, trying to kill this bill at every step of the way. So we knew we had to out-organize the opposition. And that's where strategic people power came in. We built a statewide lobbying force. We had constituents calling and their senators and assembly members educating them, sitting down and having conversations and trying to urge their support on this. So our lobbying force of 100 folks across the state outpowered Wall Street. I think we are in an incredible moment. I think the public ownership movement is on the rise, and we're seeing a real transition towards the consciousness to move away from the private ownership of services to public ownership, whether that is housing or healthcare or banking. These are essential services that contribute to the well-being of every member of society. Private developers don't have an incentive to address the basic human needs of housing or expand the access to affordable housing, just as fossil fuel producers don't have an incentive to take us to net zero carbon. We are at a pivotal moment in history to reimagine finance, to redefine finance, and reprioritize our funding, reprioritize what money can do. We can reverse the script, rewrite the rules of money, reverse the script so that money can be used to help and heal our communities rather than harm. That we're imagining that it will take about a year for them to put that business plan together, because part of that process requires a community engagement process where they have to get into the community and talk to stakeholders about what the priorities and lending priorities should be, what a democratic governance structure looks like. So we made sure that the consultants would have to engage in the community to make this proposal as democratic as possible. So we imagine that's going to take about a year. Then the city council will have to approve the business plan, and then it goes to the state regulatory agency and then the FDIC. So we're a year or two out from actualizing this idea, but this hasn't been done. The only public bank in the United States is the Bank of North Dakota, and that was done 100 years ago in 1919. So this is uncharted territory.